All right, welcome everybody. So we're SunMoonPie, and we do a variety of things. I'll give you a quick little introduction to us, just so you have a sense of where we're coming from. We lead lots of Jewish services at different synagogues around town and really around the country. And we seek to find new ways to express Judaism. And me personally, I also have been going to Buddhist meditation for the last 10 years every week, and we explore lots of different religions and cultures. And we're gonna borrow a little bit from the Hindu tradition, or the yoga tradition, of kirtan, which is a meditative chanting in which you kind of just repeat short phrases over and over again. And the idea is just to dive in deep to the meaning of those words, or if you feel less attracted to the meaning, you can just focus on the sounds of your voice and the voice around us and just the energy. And we're going to start with one that's by a man who calls himself Kirtan Rabbi. Andrew Hahn is his name, and this is his version of the Shema, which is one of the central prayers in Judaism. And it's a declaration. It says, Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. So listen. Shema means listen. Eloheinu is, Shema Yisrael, sorry. Shema Yisrael. Yisrael, of course, can be Israel, but it also can be translated to one who wrestles with God. So I like the idea of listen, one who wrestles with God. That infinite which we call God is our God, and that infinite which we call our God is one. So the unity of all things. So here we go. And for this particular one, we'll be swapping in lots of names for God, different aspects of the divine. You guys can just repeat after us. Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael, Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu, 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 Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu. Yisrael Adonai Elohim. Shema Yisrael Gevura Eloheinu. Shema Yisrael Gevura Eloheinu. So it's the Jewish New Year time right now. We just had Rosh Hashanah, and we're about to have Yom Kippur, and it's a time for renewal and kind of trying to clear through all the negative actions we might have done in the last year, ask forgiveness from both people in the world and also from God, and then to renew our faith and to renew our connection to God, which tends to get diminished, just like you have to constantly clean your car. Mine happens to be really messy right now. And like you have to clean anything in your life. And so that's the theme that we're going to explore today. We're going to focus on the idea of renewal, of cleansing, and reconnecting to the divine, to the deepest parts of ourselves. And so this next prayer is Shiru Ladonai. It has the translation in it, we'll be singing it, but sing a new song to Adonai. Adonai is what we call God. Translate to my Lord. And so when we think of singing a new song, I like to think of this in terms of, think of something new you could try in life. Think of how we tend to get in grooves, sometimes into ruts, and think about ways we can wake up every day and just have something new every day, something new to kind of keep us fresh and alive and connected to the moment and not just going on autopilot. And as a side note too, by the way, you're also welcome to grab any drums and shakers up there if you feel like, playing along, tapping, this is, they're all right there in the middle, just grab what you like. So, all right, so here we go, this is Shiru Ladonai. Once again, this is a call and response. Shiru Turn it down just a little bit. Does it feel a little bit too loud?
Not at all.
Okay, all right. So I want to make sure. I want to hear your voices too, but as long as you're good. Okay, so as we try to renew in the new year, there's a concept in Judaism called Tikkun Olam, which means repair the world. And during the holidays, we focus mostly on repairing our inner world, our inner connection to God, clearing all of our negative habits, clearing any mistakes we've made, and trying to repair any damage that might have done to others or to ourselves. But also, we try to help people in the world, and there's always, unfortunately, lots going on in the world. Corruption in governments, whatever you want to call it, but or not whatever you want to call it, but there's lots of stuff we could point to. But so we were inspired to, actually Bonnie really did this, I'll give her credit. She came up with this kirtan version of We Shall Overcome. And I really love this. This is on our CD, as is the last one. And so, yeah, we hope you enjoy this kirtan version of We Shall Overcome. Let's see, I can tune it out.
This version was just a few years ago, but it was kind of done in response to one of the, unfortunately, many police shootings of unarmed black men that was taking place, and we just sang it one day and put that version on the CD, basically. Just came out. Sometimes that's the best way to create.
There we go.
We shall overcome.
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 shall overcome.
We'll walk hand in hand.
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 We'll walk hand in
We shall live in peace.
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 We shall
We shall live in We shall all be free. 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 We are not say shalom bimroba. Uya say shalom. Aleinu ve'al Yisrael. Ve'al kol yosh be'tevel. Uya say shalom. Aleinu ve'al Aleinu say shalom bimroba. Uya say shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ve'al kol yosh be'tevel. Uya say shalom.
So, a little talking interlude. When I was first speaking with Michael about putting this together today, he asked if I'd like to do a devar. And in the Jewish tradition, a devar means a commentary interpretation of a Torah portion. And I'm thinking, you want me to do a devar? Like the Torah portion? And he had an expansive definition of the Torah portion, of the devar. He said, no, I think it might be good to just talk about the origins of where this musical style came from and the blending of traditions and along those lines. I said, okay, that sounds better than just doing an interpretation of the Torah portion. There's nothing wrong with that. So right after we got off the phone, I started making notes. And I'm generally a very organized and linear person, but not when it comes to this stuff. I just sort of splat. So I have these little notes that I can barely read and have all kinds of inspirational things that came along the way, including several this morning, and I'll try to cipher through them. But the main gist is a couple of stories. And there's a great tradition all over cultures, all over times, of great story. And some of them become what we call myths. myths in the positive sense, not myths in, oh, well, that's a myth, you don't have to. The historical aspects of the facts in these stories are not what's important. What's important is the feeling, and that somehow we have inherited these stories, and they are with us today. So there are these parallel stories from these two traditions. The first goes back into the midst of time, thousands of years ago. There was what's generally known as a primordial sage sitting in deep meditation in the Himalayas. And as this sage is sitting in deep meditation in the Himalayas, something begins to brew up, boil up, pulsate within this great sage, through this great sage. It's at first very subtle, just a very subtle pulsing. And the pulsing begins to grow and emanate and become louder into what we would call a vibration. And this vibration becomes louder. This is all internal at this point, until it becomes sound. It becomes music. It becomes chanting. And eventually it sort of bubbles out. And this sage starts verbalizing this chanting that is just coming through him. And as this is happening, maybe over long periods of time, other similarly sensitive beings in the environs, far and wide, come to this sage, and they hear this chanting. And they start joining in with this chanting from this sage. And over the generations and generations, this chanting was put forward from generation to generation. It was spread and it was handed down. And eventually, it became what's known as a language, a musical language, a chanting language. And eventually, it became a written language. It is what we have inherited as the Vedic tradition, the Vedas, these sacred texts that are the basis for the Vedic spirituality, which became the basis for Hinduism and Buddhism and Sikhism and Jainism, all grew out of this great tradition. And these Vedas were chanted from generation to generation to generation to this very day. There are people, particularly in India, but all over the world, who chant these Vedas. And all kinds of extrapolations have been created. The kirtan, call and response, based on all of this chanting, has been created. Many traditions have all kinds of call and response. Certainly Western traditions have calls and responses. So that's one great tradition. The second originates not really with Moses, but it culminates with a great Western Jewish sage, Hebrew sage we call Moses. But he inherited something deeper from an ancestor called Abraham, who had the experience of unity, of the oneness, in which all of diversity manifests, from which all diversity manifests, who came from a mysterious dimension called Ur. And Ur means light. He was a being of light who crossed over from that dimension into a lower level of vibrational dimension and began this process that culminated in this great sage from the Western tradition, the Judeo-Christian Islamic tradition, Moses going up to a mountain, not once, but twice, for 40 days and 40 nights. And when he came down from the mountain, particularly the second time, what was he doing? he was chanting. He was chanting. And as he came down from the mountain, his vibrational level was so bright, he was emanating this light. Beams of light were radiating from his face, from his body. And he came down and he was chanting. And all the people gathered around who he had led out of slavery, whether it was physical slavery or their own inner slavery or both, were gathered to him. And they started the chanting. And that chanting likewise has been passed down from generation to generation to generation to this very day, and is chanted all over the world in synagogues daily, weekly, the same kind of chanting. And Bonnie and Michael and Kirtan Rabbi and other folks like that have merged these languages, these forms, the Sanskrit, the biblical Hebrew, into what we are experiencing here today at this moment. And it is all a great, wonderful inheritance that we have received from the dawn of time, from primordial sages and their brethren and their descendants who have kept this tradition alive. And certainly one aspect to all this is we are all vibration. All of our traditions teach us that ultimately this feels solid, but what do our scientists tell us? It's vibration. It's all interconnected with this great tradition of singing, chanting, vibrating on external levels, on internal levels. It's all mantra, which is transcending the mind to reconnect, to renew in this season of the days of awe, which it's also called in Judaism, of both joy and sorrow. I suggested to Michael we begin the Eitz Chaim first with this very sorrowful chant, the sorrowful traditional version, and then add to that the joyous version, because life is a balance of the joy and the sorrow. Life is the balance of losing our way and getting back to the way, and that is the tradition. And it was remarkable when he said, he sent me an email, well, we really want to talk about renewal and return. And in the Eitz Chaim prayer are those terms, renewal and return. So it all fits in. Om Shalom. Om Shalom.
So that leads us to our next chant, which is from some of the main liturgy in the High Holy Days. In the prayer books, this is there's three words I'll teach you. One is teshuvah. Teshuvah means repentance traditionally, but another definition is return. So the idea is that whenever we do something that might not be on the mark, whether it's just a little thing like I stayed up too late and ate a bag of chips, things like that, or whether it's a big thing, said something harsh to somebody, whatever, that all these things kind of leave seeds, or they leave stains, whatever you want to call them, on our souls. And the idea is to try to clear away many of those, to recognize where we've gone wrong and to ask for the divine to clear that away so that it doesn't stain our souls. And the next word is tefillah. Tefillah means prayer. And this helps us acknowledge that we're not alone in this endeavor, that the divine, the oneness of all things, the creator of all beings, God. If we pray to God to help us, then that divinity will help, because our souls, our goal is always to clear the negativity and to come closer and closer to God, and God always wants to help us do that. And then finally there's tzedakah. Tzedakah means charity. And I like to think of it in terms of this chant as not charity of kind of, oh, I should give to somebody, give somebody who's having a hard time, but more a fundamental recognition as we clear away the obstacles to our divine connection. We see more and more, we feel and recognize our connection of all beings, and then realize that if someone is suffering in this world, then that's really part of us. It's to not recognize that as kind of like having a wounded hand, just thinking, oh, that doesn't matter, that's not part of me, I can just let that stay wounded over there. We're all kind of one big body in a way. And we culminate with a holy, holy, holy connection to God. So here we go, you can repeat after me. We'll do some extra for, there goes the D. Okay. Here we go. Teshuva,
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 Teshuva.